One of the things I try to recommend to people when I do this program is just make a policy that you do not make money decisions over the telephone or through an initial email. Give yourself some time to step back and do some research. Ask friends, hey, have you heard anything about this? Wondering if it's a good deal or not, or if it's for real. And the other thing is, remind everybody that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, and, just let it roll off your back.
Whether it's called a scam, con, fraud, or theft, people taking advantage of others financially continues to be a major problem. K-State Research and Extension Family and Consumer Sciences Agent for the Southwind District, Barbara Stockebrand, says it can happen anytime to anyone and that technology has opened the door for people with bad intentions to steal your identity or coax you into a scam simply by gathering personal information from an email or financial transaction. As part of K-State's Living Well Wednesday series, Stockebrand and Janae McNally, an adult development and aging specialist in the Frontier Extension District, are presenting a webinar titled Consumers Beware, Avoiding Identity Thefts and Scams. The online session is being held over the lunch hour on March 23rd. There is no charge to attend, but you must register in advance at ksre.ksu.edu/FCS. On today's Sound Living, avoiding identity theft and scams. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. Scammers often seek opportunities when people feel unsettled, such as during the recent pandemic or after a natural disaster, and they prey on those vulnerabilities. Scams are becoming more sophisticated, making it difficult to determine whether something is on the up and up or not. As a result, Stockebrand says we're always at risk of becoming a victim of identity theft or scams, and that we need to take steps to protect our personal information.
This topic is just ever evolving, and I think a lot of it stems around the changes in technology and new approaches that scammers especially grab onto and realize, how they can be a predator on our individuals, and it can happen at any time to anyone, but we do know that our older adults are really the ones that are targeted, and there are some specific reasons why they are, and that's sad that anyone would want to take advantage of that.
I think what makes this really difficult, Barbara, is the fact that these are often elaborate schemes and they sound sometimes to be legitimate.
That's correct. And that's really hard for folks to decipher. We used to have the door-to-door salesman a lot, but now that since we have the technology, we have emails come across, they can copy name brand business logos and put those in emails to make those look official. We kind of used to think that calls that we would get over the phone, might have been just some random individual somewhere that, was doing this for their own personal business. But there is a wide variety of large businesses that have been developed. Most of them are probably outside of our country. And so it makes it hard for our government to regulate them. Anyway, they make it a big business in order to prey on those people who have assets. And unfortunately, they kind of figured out our older adults are ones that maybe the asset holders of our population.
And they don't discriminate. Against age, race, identity, financial background. They're looking for any prey that they can prey upon.
And this really kicked into high gear during COVID, didn't it? Because there were so many people that were really, at their disposal to target.
Yes, first of all, they're at home. A lot of people were working from home. And then we were all starting to hear about COVID funds that we could be receiving, and they were just kind of coming out of the blue. And so we'd be looking for those things or looking to hear more about those funds. And then we'd have these folks that jump into the arena that are scamming people. Examples would be like, if you pay a small fee, I could get you your money quicker, that kind of thing. And then it morphed into, when we were doing the testing, getting some of those free tests and so forth. They were doing the same thing there. We could get you so many tests for a fee, and then it probably didn't even exist.
They would also prey on our loneliness. All of us were kind of stuck at home, and maybe we got lonely, and, someone called asking, a loved one who was in need. and we didn't know the difference, and maybe we hadn't talked to that loved one in a while. That was another type that was going on as well.
And to piggyback off of what Janae just said, scammers know that when people are unsettled, maybe feeling like they're in a crisis, because of a crisis like this was, they prey on those vulnerabilities and they just continue on with that.
So are there some warning signs that something may not be legitimate, may not be on the up and up?
Asking personal information, if it's at the beginning of a relationship, or maybe your social security number, bank account numbers, those kinds of things are sometimes things that as they build that relationship with you, that might be a red sign, especially if you haven't met them in person. You haven't got to physically see them or be with them. Those are some things you never want to give out as your personal identification information.
Yes, and to continue on with that, when there are like calls coming in or even emails, they're going to be pressuring you to make a decision, and they want you to make that decision quickly so you don't have time to think about it. So there's the urgency there, along with some intimidation as far as, you really have to do this, that added pressure. And then they use technical terms that, you may not understand. They try to confuse the person that they're calling, and they just know how to manipulate people.
You mentioned technology, and I think one of the scams that has been popping up recently deals with your computer's been infected. We can take over your computer, and we can solve your problems for you. That's something that you totally want to avoid.
Yes. They can hack into your computer, which what's on a lot of our computers is personal information that they don't need access to, and, it's best to not click on anything, and if you ever have questions, call someone that does know how to help.
And on top of that, they're probably infecting your computer in the process so that they can hack it later, or, as Janae said, get into the information that's there and maybe even access other people's computers through your computers. So, yes, that's been around for a while. Another big red flag for a scam is that if somebody contacts you without your making initial contact and telling you that something needs to be done, or we need to take care of something that you have no clue about, that's one of the biggest red flags there is, that it's a scam, because somebody from the outside really doesn't know what's going on in your life or your home. And for them to come along and say that something's wrong and it's urgent, that's one of those things you need to step back and say, let me think about it, or hang up. It's the best way.
And that's difficult for some people to do, isn't it, to end the call and to simply hang up?
It is. I've also heard other people, if you're encouraging, what's your name and phone number? Maybe I'll get back with you. Then quickly they get off the phone, it seems like, on their end, because they don't want to give you that information. But yeah, it's just best to hang up and beware of who you're talking to.
What are some other things that you're going to cover during your webinar coming up on the 23rd?
Well, some other things that we'll be looking at is, Janae already kind of identified some personal information that folks need to know is their personal information in the first place and not to be sharing with others. What does identity theft look like in itself? Some ways to spot it. One of the big things in that process is making sure you check your credit report on a regular basis so that you can see the activity on the financial side for sure that is going on in your name. Some tips on protection of your personal identification, a little bit on what to do if your identity is stolen, because even though we are doing everything correctly, and we know that some big businesses have been hacked to where the personal identification has been accessed by those who shouldn't have it.
I think a lot of people went through that during COVID, because when they started issuing unemployment, there were some problems even with the government.
Yeah, I was one of those that got one of those notices from my employer that there may be a fraudulent claim on my unemployment. So I kind of went through the hoops of what I needed to do to let the proper authorities know that, that this was not me and that made the claim and so forth. That was a real popular one.
And that's kind of a scary process, isn't it? Because you're caught completely off guard, and then you realize there's all these things that you need to do on your own to protect yourself further, or at least prevent you from possibly losing more money.
That's correct. And one of those big things is contacting some of those credit reporting companies to let them know. That's one of the first big steps to do.
And it can be very scary and overwhelming for anyone that has that happen, no matter, if you're 50 or 25 or 75. But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to give them some tips on who to contact and where to go.
Does the Federal Trade Commission have a lot to do with this? Are they kind of the overseer of this area?
Yes. You can make reports of identity theft to them, and they have a lot of information on their website as far as for scams and for identity theft, making reports, who to contact. Yeah, they're the ones that really oversee. And actually, they're the ones that try to regulate all of this processes, but we find that a lot of the scams in particular are not even reported, so there's no way to prosecute those. And then regulations are hard to do because a lot of them originate from out of the country.
That's an important point you bring up, the fact that if you think you are the victim or if you think someone is trying to scam you, to report it.
Yes, that's the most important thing. So, they can track that and identify that and help maybe others not become, a victim of that. So make sure you're going through those right hoops and channels to report those and, seeking out that help and advice on what to do.
And they kind of follow cycles. COVID brought through, a whole series of different types of scams that came about. If there's another disaster somewhere in the, another part of the country, you're going to have people coming through. They're going to be offering services, door to door possibly, and maybe they're just wanting to see if they can get in your home and see what kind of other assets that are there. But even phone and email scams also related to disasters, whatever kind of timely things that are going on. Tax season is another one, and we're coming into that. So we need to be aware that there could be some issues with filing our taxes.
We mentioned that they often prey on the elderly. Are there things that family members can do to try and protect their loved ones?
Having a great relationship with that family member and trusting each other, and hopefully your loved one, if you saw some red flags and signs, would trust you to know that, hey, maybe I should step back from this situation. And, just always check in on loved ones. Maybe it's your elderly mom or dad or grandparents that you're helping care for, but always just kind of being aware of what's going on, maybe with their finances and what information they're giving out to others, but supporting them if something goes wrong, or just hoping that they communicate with you if someone's called that normally doesn't call that they're not aware of and ask for that personal information.
A lot of us have caller ID or an answering machine, but maybe some of our older relatives don't have those kinds of things, and maybe we ought to look into supporting our older relatives with making sure that they have that tool anyway, and then they can decide if they want to answer that call or not when it comes in by telephone. Our older adults especially, they're sometimes kind of isolated, as Janae had kind of pointed out earlier, and if they do get caught, they feel embarrassed, and then they feel like they've failed. And a lot of times, they enjoy a conversation because they don't have maybe that daily contact with somebody if they're alone and at home. And those are the ones that a lot of times don't get reported. So we need to support them in that way, because a lot of times, we might feel like that they don't understand their finances well enough and can handle that maybe they are having some issues of living on their own, and maybe they are. So kind of look at those a little closer. One of the things I try to recommend to people when I do this program is just make a policy that you do not make money decisions over the telephone or through an initial email. Give yourself some time to step back and do some research, ask friends, hey, have you heard anything about this? Wondering if it's a good deal or not, or if it's for real. And the other thing is, remind everybody that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, and, just let it roll off your back.
That's K-State Research and Extension Family and Consumer Sciences Agent for the Southwind District, Barbara Stockebrand. Barbara and Janae McNally, an Adult Development and Aging Specialist in the Frontier Extension District, are presenting the webinar titled Consumers Beware, Avoiding Identity Thefts and Scams over the Lunch Hour on March 23rd. There is no charge for the webinar. However, you must register in advance at ksre.ksu.edu/FCS, then click on the link for the Living Well Wednesday webinar series. If you're already registered for that series, you'll get an email reminder of the upcoming webinar. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.